Hello, we are here today for an interview with someone who's one of our Patreons who we've gotten to know recently on our Zooms. Another reason to join. He's awesome. And he's coming to us from San Diego. Jeff Wadstrom, welcome.
Hey,
Hello.
Jeff.
Oh, good to see you
I
guys.
think we quoted you a couple times
We
in a
have.
couple of
I don't know
podcasts.
if that's
Yeah.
good or bad.
I think it's good. You have an interesting coming into this fast. And we like to say you're celebrating one day late your 60th birthday with us. So
Happy
happy birthday.
birthday.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
thank you.
What a time, right? So to come into all this. So what's your story? We kind of know a little from Patreon, but
Yeah,
not
But
the
our
full thing.
listeners don't. So
Hmm.
let's
well,
tell
no, I
us.
mean, it's crazy. It's like adoption never really was a big issue in our minds through pretty much our whole life. And it wasn't until about,
And you have to explain that because you're from a family with different
yeah, yeah,
adoptees. So,
yeah. So my parents adopted me from Salt Lake City, Utah in 1964. They had adopted the year before my sister Barbara, and then me, and then a year later, twins. So they had three of
Mm,
us, or four of us within 3 years
four.
of each other. Yeah,
Wow. And
exactly.
did they ever have biological children?
No, and so we've learned. What I grew up with and what my life was like was such a different perspective than what I'm learning now. And I'm starting to learn about stuff, like even kind of with the adoption, I thought adoption, like if you had your life as kind of a portrait, all the things in life kind of are like colors, right? And adoption was, I thought, just one of these colors. But the more I'm learning about it within even the last 3 months, the more I'm seeing that it's more like the canvas that our life is painted on. It's kind of like that
mm.
color, your adoption is the canvas, and the rest of your life is kind of painted on that. So for me, it's really revealed a lot of significance of all these other things in my life that I really never attributed to being adopted. And later
I,
on,
I really like your analogies. We'll use that one too. Another.
yeah, I
Yes.
live in
You've had some
analogies.
good.
My whole life is analogies.
You've
And
had some good ones, and that's a good one. I was like, oh, that's the canvas is the
And Jeff, you
adoption.
are just,
Yeah.
we could have a book of quotes by Jeff Wadstrom.
there you go.
I
So,
I like that.
yeah, and I'm learning a lot. You guys are going to be going through my learning of this in real time because a lot of the stuff I'm learning, even this last
Yes.
week, the last few days.
I mean, this is if you listen to us from the beginning, we came out of the fog in real time in season one. So
Sure.
This is
sounds
your
like,
season one.
Yeah.
yeah.
So what I learned probably 3 weeks ago was that so both my parents are doctors. The parents that adopted us are doctors, and
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Los Alamos, New Mexico. So
Mm.
I was born in Salt Lake City. My dad was doing his residency there or teaching. And I learned that my mom's an anesthesiologist, my dad's an OBGYN. And so I learned that my mom was teaching and also practicing at Holy Cross Hospital, where all of us were born.
Oh,
So we
so
were
the
all born at
connection.
We were all born at Holy Cross Hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah, and then we were adopted through an adoption agency. And then I never,
Were they bumped to the front of the line because of their connection to the hospital?
I have no idea. I can't say that they were. I don't know. But back then, Barbara has got a lot with her file. So there's a lot in her file that describes a lot of stuff, and it's almost like The Handmaid's Tale a little bit. It's kind of crazy. Like
Mm.
these people seem to be of superior. They use like
Oh boy.
wording, and so you're just kind of like,
Is this LDS by the way, or
no, no, no.
no, just
So
no.
two adoption agencies in Salt Lake at the time were LDS. One
Right. I
was
knew that.
Catholic and one was the Holy Cross. And so
Oh.
my mom grew up Presbyterian. Both my parents went to Wheaton College, which is kind of a religious college and stuff.
Hmm.
So they adopted Barbara. A year later, adopted me, and then twins. And then they moved to New Mexico with the twins. Like right after they received them, they moved. So we're learning that Barbara was adopted, and then a year later, it was official. I was adopted, and then a year later, I was adopted May 64, but it became official June of 65.
So you didn't go with them at the beginning?
So all these questions we don't know because you just didn't talk about any of this. So you're going to
Well, it
find,
takes a while for adoption to get, that's typical.
Right.
It's a while. Mine too. It was about a year before they went in front of the judge, but you do stay with your parents,
But
Yeah.
right?
So
you said they moved with
Yeah.
the twins.
yeah. So Barbara, we found out she was with a foster family for a while before she was adopted. And I don't know how long that was. I probably was somewhere for 3 weeks, but I don't know where. I don't have any of that information. I was born and then I was received by Barbara and my parents in June of 64. So I really don't know where I was between that. And it really, to me, didn't make it, wasn't a big deal, right? And then you're starting to see, oh, wait a second, it really kind of can be a big deal. But they adopted Mark and Carol. Mark and Carol were born, and then 3 weeks later, they are in Los Alamos with them. And then we learned,
Were you and Barbara not in
Yeah,
Los
that's what
Alamos?
that's
oh
I'm
yeah,
what
we all
confused about
went.
that.
So we all
Oh,
went.
okay. You're
oh,
just saying that it was an immediate
theirs was
move.
faster.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they immediately went. And
That's
then
where I was confused.
we
Okay.
Yeah,
learned
same.
that it took 3 years for them to get officially adopted because they were out of state.
Mm.
So anyway, we're learning all this like this month. So it's really kind of interesting.
I think the interesting thing that you're learning too is just like, oh, these mind-blowing things about your stuff growing up and tell us how your life was growing up, all these things.
Yeah.
And have you been in reunion?
So I've been in email communication with my birth mom for two
Oh,
years.
okay. Okay. So we can
Oh,
back
two
up and
years.
Yeah,
Oh,
for
okay.
2 years. So since 2022, June of 2022. And we'll get to that. But
yeah.
yeah, so both parents being physicians, they, they, and I look at it like they were just young. Like you had my dad was 36 when they adopted us. My mom was 32. And we learned, I learned later, even this year, that my dad was the one that couldn't have kids. And so I was thinking how much grief or whatever, how challenging that would be. You're an OBGYN delivering babies and
Aye.
wanting families, but then you couldn't ever have one on your own. And so it's kind of like I give everybody kind of the benefit of the doubt and kind of grace going, everyone was trying to do their best. It's a tough situation. And I'm learning that traumas occurred, but traumas occurred to three different parties, let's say, and they
Yeah.
all go through their own. And it's just kind of a tough situation. You know what I'm saying? So,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
so my parents were both physicians in a small town in New Mexico, and they weren't very emotionally or physically affectionate at all. It's kind of like how your doctors are in their doctor's office,
Was your
kind
They
parents?
of
were
how they were at home. You
they
know?
had no bedside manner at home, is what you're saying?
No,
That's crazy.
I think they even had, I think my dad's had more bedside manner at the practice than he did at home,
Oh
because it's
gosh.
almost like the mechanic who works on cars,
Right.
then gets home. It's like, dude, I've been dealing with
I don't
baby.
care about our car. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but they provided for us, and back then it was just like, hey, they provided a lot for us. So we just kind of all knew all the time that we were adopted. And my
Don't you
mom,
find it interesting how people maybe, they're physicians, they're busy, they're working, they want a family, but they're not that affectionate. And you think, why do you want a family? That's always mind
Right.
blowing to me. Like, why? Like, why have a family then? But
yeah,
I guess
exactly. And my
so
mom was
strange.
like, my mom was one of these strong professional women. Like they
Yeah.
were both, because they're dealing in Los Alamos with these nuclear physicists and
Oh, yeah.
the lab there, they all have top level clearance in the government. So they're all on national boards. So she's dealing with all these national boards, and she's a professional and she's strong. And they were both very prominent in the community. I mean, my dad, half the city was his patients as women, and he delivered almost, half the kids. So everyone was like, oh yeah, he delivered you. Whenever we'd go out, it's like, oh, they delivered you. So talking with my sister Barbara through all this, I think one of the things we had felt, or that I felt right away, was it was really not our story. It was kind of like their story. Because whenever we'd go places, it'd be like, oh, these great doctors adopted these four kids. And so what a
Did
great,
such a wonderful
yeah,
service to
exactly.
these.
What great hearts they had. You guys are, you kids. So it was always, we'd be out to dinner at a restaurant and people would come up and talk to my dad, tell their kids, oh yeah, he delivered you. And and you know, it's great. And it was like, oh, you kids are so lucky to have such good
Right.
parents. So you just kind of,
And everybody would say that to you.
right. So you just kind of fall into that, okay, this, and then at home, you know, we weren't really that close. I mean, it was like a family, but it was almost like, okay, let's take this kid, these kids, these parents. Let's make kind of like a Frankenstein family. Okay, guys, you're normal. Let's all work together. And you're like, kind of, okay, that's all we knew as family, though. There, what you didn't talk about feelings, and but yet we feel their love. You know, like my mom was very, very giving and very compassionate, and also helped so many people in the city. And we learned later on, I learned a couple weeks ago, that from when we were born to when we graduated, when I graduated at 18, every year my mom would send Christmas cards with all of us to the adoption agency, just kind of letting them know this is where we're at, we're following up, because she really was grateful for
But
all
so
of it.
did nobody ever tell you anything about your
Do they?
birth
Yeah.
situation or your
No,
parent?
you
Nothing. It
just,
was just like you didn't, nothing. You here you are, blank slate, tally ho kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it just wasn't up for
Uh,
discussion. I mean, when you have two doctors as parents, it's like you go through life and the narrative is, if you ask questions, you're either wrong or you just don't know enough to know you're wrong. So you just didn't bring up things, you
But
know what
here
I'm
these
saying?
are doctors who especially in OB, who witnesses women giving
Mother.
birth to their
Hmm.
own children, to their biological children. Was there just a disconnect that you wouldn't have these questions, that none of these four children would have a question about where they came from? Was it just a disconnect?
I mean, I can't speak for my brothers or sisters, but we never talked amongst ourselves, and I never talked to my parents about it. It was just
It
kind of
just
like,
wasn't talked
it's just
about.
like, you're great, you know, we're lucky to have you. You're lucky that we're going to give you a great life. It's kind of like, if you bring up anything you feel that could be negative, oh, you're just ungrateful. You need to be grateful. You're ungrateful. You know,
Hmm.
so it was just kind of that narrative.
So any feelings or thoughts you might have had about where I came from, you just kind of learned to stuff those down and
Yeah, and so for me, and there's a couple other things that happened in my life that kind of helped me accept kind of this role. So like I always had really bad scoliosis.
ooh,
Hmm.
So when I
me
was
too.
young, so when I was young and they do those little scoliosis checks in PE,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
me and the
gosh,
teacher would
yes.
go, okay, kids, come here, look at this. And so everybody gathered around. Okay, see Jeff's back, see the curvature. Okay,
Are
this,
you an S curvature or a C?
I'm an S with a
Me
rotation.
too.
Oh,
And so, yeah, it's like a 57-degree curvature with a
yeah.
rotation. And so they were always wanting to put rods in my
Yeah.
back then. And I'm like, so for me, I found my place in sports. So sports was where I kind of found my identity, because having the scoliosis, now you're just kind of like, okay, that, and when people would come hug you, they'd be like, oh, what's wrong with your back? So for
Ah,
me, it was like I always kind of kept a distance because I didn't want to always have to explain what's wrong with my back, that I have scoliosis. You know what I'm saying? And so I, for my whole life, was going, okay, I'm not really that affectionate. And
and
I
you're already, then you're
attributed,
building another wall.
right. And I
Hmm.
had attributed it to scoliosis, right? And so, um, and then in middle school and high school, I had to wear a back brace. So I had to wear a back brace too. And so whenever I could, the only time I could take it off was when I played sports. So I got really involved with sports. And that became, so humor, I was always had a good sense of humor. And that was kind of my role in the family. I was the one always doing jokes. At school, that was kind of where I
Hmm.
was. But all my teachers were my dad's patients.
Hey,
So it's just kind of like, you know, and so anyway,
There was really no like
no, safe
safe
place.
place for you.
Hmm.
well, no, safe place. I'm learning now. I never felt safe anywhere. Now,
Mm-hmm.
inside though, but I did inside, I always felt like I was valued, I was important, or I wouldn't be alive. I would have been aborted, I would have been given to the state, something. But for some reason, I'm here. And I always attributed it to, okay, God has a plan for me. So I always kind of had this faith inside of going, okay, I want to do good. I want to be able to help people. I want to use my life to be able to help impact other people and be good, because you have to have a proof or have a reason why your existence is there in your own mind, right? Because you just really didn't quite fit in different places. Now, here's the other thing. Los Alamos, New Mexico is not the normal city. So,
Right. I've heard this.
so it's all these nuclear physicists. 90% of the people work for the lab. So these guys are the brilliant people brought from other countries back to build the bomb, and then the lab continues. And the whole goal is, let's provide secure national security, and through the secret, they call it the secret city in the atomic city. So a lot of stuff is going on, whether it's UFOs, whether it's whatever, there's all these things you just don't talk about. So I love the show Big Bang Theory, because,
Hmm.
and then, of course, Penny there is the only kind of quote unquote one that's not the genius. So that's how I felt all the time. I'm in school with these kids that are like making lasers for
Rocket scientist.
projects, and I'm over here sticking styrofoam balls on doilies trying to make, it's just, so I realized if I study or if I don't, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to be in the lower percentile at school. So let me get involved with sports and let me entertain. So that's kind of the role that I kind of,
It's interesting because I do think adoptees take on extra roles, right? You become something, or you just put up these little armors, you know.
yeah. And so it was really interesting. And then I remember we were at a family reunion, and all my brothers and sisters remember this. And there was we were to my mom's family out in Pennsylvania, and they made this painting of a family tree. So it was this family tree with all the red apples on this family tree. And over here on this branch
Oh
are four
God.
yellow apples.
Oh
I had
gosh.
this. I have mine in a chart that I'm red and everybody
Yeah,
else is
so,
not red.
oh yeah, so they
My
have the
son.
four yellow apples over here, Barbara, Jeff,
How
Mark, Sarah.
awkward.
And so here's the cognitive dissonance that we always have to go through. So for me, I've always felt like I'm the problem, but I'm also the solution. So it's
Right.
like,
That's what you've said. And that's our quote
Hmm.
that we
yeah, it's kind of
attribute
like,
to you.
okay, I was a problem to my birth mom, not a problem. I mean, it's hard, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Here's a problem, so it's best to give him up for adoption. Not that it's bad. I mean, it's probably like I can't, handle, so I'm going to put him up for adoption for this other family. So I'm a problem here. At the same time, you're a solution for
Mm-hmm.
this family that couldn't have kids. So you're always the problem and the solution. And so
Hmm.
everything in life is kind of cut and paste with that. So one of the things I'm realizing is I've always had issues, never really felt, I mean, I've really not felt a lot of things. You kind of stuff your emotions down because you don't ever really talk. We didn't talk about feelings at home. No one talked to me about, how do you feel about having scoliosis? How do you feel about having to wear a back brace? That never came up. It just came up as, okay, you put this on, this is
You'll
gonna,
be wearing this.
you'll be
Yeah.
wearing it, it'll help. And so it was all technical. Everything was technical. If you fall down, skin your knee, okay, come here. Okay, good. Now you're able to go. So, everything was there. So you kind of just go through life and having to manage yourself inside. And so you're always,
Mm-hmm.
so I learned, and I'm just coming to this even just yesterday or the day before, it's like I've had to go, because I had a stroke about 4.5 years ago. I had to start going to different types of therapy and starting to put different pieces together. And that's when some of this stuff is coming. And I realized, so they're like, why don't you really feel one way or another about your birthday? And I'm like, I really don't have an emotion or have a desire one way or the other. I'm not really excited or not. And then it's like, well, how do you feel about Mother's Day? Because my birthday always comes directly after Mother's Day,
Always, right? Yeah.
or before or on Mother's Day. So Mother's Day was always a national holiday, right? And so um, I know when Mother's Day come, that's when you're adopted. You're like, I wonder what my birth mom feels. I wonder
Yeah.
if it's a sad day for her, or I wonder if it's a happy day for her.
When did you start thinking about that? Was that your whole life and you just kind of kept
I mean,
it?
it's a lot of it is subconscious, but a lot of
Hmm.
it is like, why? So at the same time, I'm celebrating my mom who adopted us, but you're like, okay, it is Mother's Day, but you're not really, I mean, you are our mom and we appreciate and we're grateful, but it always then goes to, okay, but what about my birth mom? You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And so it's like,
Yeah. And I still have a kind of a visceral reaction to the word grateful, that we have to be grateful to being, I don't know. I just don't like having this. Sorry, I'm struggling with words. Go on.
no,
I'll
no,
probably
I
cut that
totally
out.
get that. So what I've realized is that you have Mother's Day where you're wrestling and kind of going, okay, can I really, I don't know if this is bringing pain for my birth mom, the reminding of giving up a child, or
Hmm.
on the other extreme, maybe she went on, had another family, and now I'm forgotten. And maybe it,
Mm.
the fact that you don't know, you're sitting here wrestling with this
And you're
subconscious.
not talking to Barbara or your other
No,
sibling about
you
it.
just don't talk. You
Or your
just kind of,
parents. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's just kind of like that's just life. And so then next day or 2 days later, then it's your birthday. That's the reminder again. So now it's my birthday. Okay, are we going to celebrate? And so it's kind of like if let's say you had a birthday and then something tragic like you lost a child that same day.
Yeah.
You can't really, you want to celebrate your birthday, but you can't because there's also a sorrow that's tied to it. So
Mm.
for me, throughout different things in life, there's always that joy and sorrow together, that cognitive dissonance that you have to keep these with you wherever you go. So those different things were always
It's like the
part.
great compartmentalizing, right?
Right, exactly. So it's like, oh, it's great having parents that were doctors and they're great in the city. Everyone thinks they're so great, which they are, and we really are proud of them and love them, but you lose your story. It's like you don't start your story. It's kind of like
Yeah.
you're part of this story a little bit, you know? And so,
It's
but
kind of
then
where you
Yeah. I mean,
land. You
it's
become that story, right? Wherever you're placed, you could have been placed elsewhere, and that would have been your story. It's an
yeah,
interesting.
right.
exactly.
Just a random, in my case, because my first mother's water broke on a plane, landed in St. Louis, and that's where I was born. It is kind of weirdly random. Had you been born 15 minutes later, maybe
Right.
another family would have gotten you, it's just, and
Strange.
then being told that babies are blank slates, which probably your adoptive father knew that not to be the case. As an OB who delivered so many babies, he probably knew they weren't blank slates, but it was still the narrative of the time.
Yeah, and so like I said, we just never even talked about it. So that cognitive dissonance, then you go to the tree with the apples.
Yeah.
With the yellow
Gosh.
apples.
Did you
But so
did
here,
was that then not able to be brought up? Like still it wasn't like, hey,
Nobody brought
where
it up to me. I just was red. It's so
well, no, so
weird.
here's the thing. But here's where I'm a little bit different. So my mom was pissed,
Oh, good.
and her mom was pissed. So they were like, you need to go change those apples.
Oh, you need to color those red.
Right. Now, inside, what I was feeling is I was like, well, finally someone's being truthful.
Right.
We
That's
aren't,
interesting.
don't, if you paint them red, you're saying we're part of your tree, and we're not. You're
Yeah.
asking
right.
us to take on a whole nother role. And so you're caught with there's
It's like
no
a badge of
answer.
honor. Like when I saw that for my family tree, Jack and I, my son, were like, well, aren't we cool and different? Right? Like,
Yeah, there is
screw
that kind
it.
of like the
Screw it.
mystery. There's that
Yeah.
mystery about being adopted. You can make whatever story you want in your life, right? And so I think, and then I heard these women talking, and I must have been like 8 or 9 at the time when all this was going on. And I heard them talking, hey, I want to just get a picture because they had a picture of the whole reunion too. And they go, we should get a picture of just those that are blood related. And
Mm.
Oh,
okay, right. So that's the natural reaction.
people
But
are so awful.
I was kind of going, you're right. I mean, we aren't blood related. So for me, I
It made
appreciated
sense to
the
you.
It made
audience. Yeah,
sense.
it's like
Yeah.
it made sense, and we never talked about it. So at least, okay, at least these people are being honest. because I've been playing this role of, oh, you're Swedish,
The
or
outside
yeah,
people are
that's
being honest, which is
right.
interesting. Mhm.
Exactly. And I remember in elementary school, whenever they had those days of like, okay, guys, today's Family Heritage Day, everybody bring a meal from
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
relative.
I hated that.
I'd go to my teachers and I'm saying, I'm adopted. And they'd be like, well, your dad here is Swedish. I go, yeah, but he's Swedish. If this was, he can come and bring this, but what do I do? Like, well, since you don't know, you guys can be anything you want. So I remember going home and going, okay, this year I want to be Italian. I'll bring Italian food. So I'd bring different ones, but it was just kind of like the guys I related to growing up were Tom Sawyer, the,
Yeah.
you
The
know,
outcasts.
yeah, exactly. Uh, what's the orphan out in London? What was that? There was
Yeah, Oliver.
yeah, Oliver Twist, Pinocchio
Oh,
even.
me too,
So,
Pinocchio.
so it
Mhm.
was like
I want to
you
be a
knew
real boy.
exactly. So you knew you wanted your story, you didn't know what it was, and you had no answers. And so it's like, and we knew at a young age, they're giving us our birth certificate, and we're like, okay, I know this is my legal document, but this is not my birth certificate because I know you aren't the parents that gave birth to me. And yet you're the ones that are saying here, Howard Wodstrom, Ann Wodstrom, parents of, but to this day, I don't know how much I weigh. Don't know how
You
long I,
still don't. You haven't
yeah,
found any of that. No.
I don't have any of that information. So it's just kind of like, there's that. And I didn't think any big deal about it. It's just kind of like, oh, you're just because you're living in the present. Okay, I've got to be grateful for this. I am grateful because of the life I live in. I have food, I have this. Yeah, and you can pick every bad scenario you want. I'm glad I'm not this, or I'm glad I'm not that. But you still are trying to find a safe place
Yeah.
that really feel like your voice matters or that
Which
you,
I think that's a big thing because what you're saying, this always plagues me because there are massive problems out there in the world. I mean, stuff every day I wake up and think, oh, okay, look where we live, look what's happening, this kind of thing. But we are also allowed to feel, you know, I can't imagine how it would feel not to feel displaced, sort of. Does that make sense? So there's a comfort in just knowing who you are that people take for granted. And that I think adoptees kind of come in, you're batting zero before you're even up, you know what I mean?
Well,
Sports
it's called
analogies.
kept privilege is what
Yeah, of
you're
course.
referring to, Louise.
But
Yeah.
but I think to explain it to outsiders, like it's that, you're coming into a ball game and in this fifth inning,
yeah.
and it's a strange scenario, right? It's a weird, so you're allowed to, like, you can say, okay, I'm grateful for all this, but you're also allowed to have your feelings about you. And
Yeah,
that's
it's like I
that's
shared with you
all.
guys
Yeah.
before that you always feel like you're the plus one and the one never shows up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you
Another
go to
good
a
one.
wedding, let's say you go to a wedding and you're the plus one, one doesn't show up and you're just kind of going, okay, all these people know each other. I have to share of why I should be here.
Hold on, I need to write this down. Another Jeff quote.
Yeah, and then it's like, okay, well, you eat. Okay, I don't know anybody. Well, but you should be grateful because you got to eat a meal here. And you're like, okay, but that doesn't solve
Why plus one?
the feelings inside that I just don't feel.
How did you do with relationships growing up and things like that? With
Um, I mean, and I attribute it some to different things. One was like, of course, the scoliosis. I was like,
Yeah,
okay, it's hard for me to, you guys have that saying, don't hug me, I'm adopted,
yeah,
right? And so
yeah.
that makes sense to me.
You really have that.
But for me, it was like, don't hug me, I got scoliosis. And I don't want you to ask me what's wrong with my back. So relationships, I always had one or two really good friends, but not real. I was kind of an introvert. I didn't drink. So like I played a lot of sports and by high school, a lot of guys would go to parties, even in the backyard. And I didn't drink. So I was that guy that they'd always try to get to drink and then I didn't. And I was pretty, at the time, I wouldn't say religious, but I really felt like, okay, this is the only thing I have. This is the only thing that's mine, is what I have inside. And I want to treat people right. And I found that the Bible and the way Jesus lived was like, I want to be like that because he was an outcast and I can relate to that and everything is good. And that's what I want. I want to bring good. You know what I'm saying? So
Did you get into this is kind of weird. ask, but your parents weren't that religious, right?
My mom was, my
Oh,
mom
your mom was
and
religious.
my
Okay.
dad was until he became a doctor in Los Alamos. And then my mom said he started drinking when he started going to these parties and he wanted his identity more with the peers. And so my dad, even as we were growing up, was like an alcoholic. I mean, that's how he was. He drank every day. My mom, to the day she died, never touched a drink at all.
I was
So now,
wondering why so young you didn't drink and then different as
yeah,
your
so now,
mixed
so
in.
I saw my mom and my dad, and you have two strong-willed, very respected people that have their own opinions. And we grew up and they were fighting all the time. And so I remember when we were young, I asked my mom when she was tucking us into bed, me and my brother shared a room. He said, "Are you and dad going to get a divorce?" Because we always heard they were fighting all the time. And my mom said, "No, we would never do that to you kids." And so even at that age, 6 or whatever, we knew that's not the right answer. So now we were
That's
this,
another layer of trauma, really, because you have
yeah, so we were the
fighting and
solution to them not having kids, but now we're the problem because mom could now, if we weren't here, she could divorce my dad and go find someone that loved her. But because we're here now, she can't do that. So she wouldn't get divorced because of us. So now we're the problem. So you're always the solution, but the problem. And it's just balancing that too. So there's not a huge rejoicing. So my character is very, very stable, very melancholy, that you're not going to fully rejoice, but you're not going to fully be sad because you got to carry both at all times. And so
So,
it,
that,
so here you are though, you're now 60, right? And it's only been a
mm-hmm.
couple, you just told us it was a couple of years that you've been in email contact. Um, it sounds like this family situation was, and I have some family stuff that it took me a long time to unpack to then be able to look towards the adoption as the initial wound, right? So here you are, it took till you were 58, and unpacking a lot to do with your family. But when did you now turn towards
Mm,
yourself?
yeah.
And
so,
and
okay, so here's where we're at. So Barbara moved in with us. We had our third son when we lived in Long Beach, California, and he was born in 97. So Barbara was living with us in Long Beach at the time. I get a phone call from someone I didn't know that said, "Ask, is Barbara there?" And I had this weird feeling like, dude, this is ominous. I've never felt this way before. There's some ominous feeling about this phone call. Something's up. I don't know what it is. So I said, "No, can I take a message?" No. So I hung up. They called back later that night to Barbara, and it was her birth mom.
Oh,
So they had found Barbara. Her birth mom hired a private investigator to go find her birth mom. And so, or to go find Barbara. So then Barbara found her birth mom. And so we were talking a little bit about that. And so then the private investigator said, in order to search for Barbara, I had to search all you other kids. Do you want any information that I have on your birth mom?
oh, so you had it there.
So it was like, okay, that would be cool. So I got the name.
Wait, go back really quick. You and Barbara are living together. You're not still talking. You still haven't talked about any of
Oh,
this.
none of it. And
Why
so it's
this is
just
all
kind of like,
coming in. Okay.
and so
Yeah.
then it's just like, and Barb is going through all these feelings. So what do we do? Do you tell dad? Do you tell mom and dad about this? And so she she became very close to her birth parents. And that pissed off my dad because my dad's like, "Oh, they're just after money. They just want our money."
Oh, brother.
So at the time, I was in the ministry. I was a minister at a church, and so I actually was doing Barbara's wedding. And so so anyway, to go back, I had information on my birth mom, but then and we didn't know what was right or what was wrong because everyone's story is not complete. And so I'm going, okay, I know my birth mom's story. I don't know. I'm not going to read into this, but I had a number and I'm like, do I call? Do I not call? So I called this number and it was a number of her dad in Yakima, Washington. And someone answered the phone and I said, "Hey," and I said her name, "Is she there?" And they go, "No, she's living in another place. Do you want her number?" I'm like, "You don't give her number to strangers," but this lady did. And so I called there and they're like, well, she's not here right now. So I'm like, okay. And that's the ones you dial and hang up because it's like, I don't want to open up this can of worms. I don't know if I'm ready for all this. So anyway, I'd let it be. And in less than 6 months later, I moved with all my kids and my wife. We moved to Beirut. So we moved out of the country.
Oh, yeah, that's a big
Lebanon.
move.
Oh, yeah, it was. And so Barbara was back there. And so Barbara ended up getting married while we were overseas. And she had her birth mom and her sisters in the wedding and wanted her birth dad to be in it as well. So I fly back to do the wedding, and my dad is pissed. He doesn't want any of them. So I'm kind of arbitrating, going, okay, dad, look it, because now my dad, the wedding's not about Barbara, the wedding's about him.
Right.
Because
And
he,
did your adopted mom already pass?
no, I haven't even contacted her yet.
No, not birth mom, adopted
Oh,
mom.
my adopted mom's there too as
Oh,
well.
she's there.
So
Okay.
she's like, okay, guys, I know found her birth parents. If you find yours, that's fine, but just don't tell dad.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you're just kind of playing these games of loyalty, and you're like, dude, don't make us a part of this craziness. So, anyway,
Right.
so then we worked things out, and they had the wedding, um, and Barbara didn't even know I had to run, between,
Interference.
like, Barbara, you just need to enjoy your wedding. You don't even need to know this is going on to distract you. You just need, so I'm dealing with my mom and my dad about, dad, relax. And so we kind of did the wedding, but it was all about his daughter's wedding was all about him. But that's my dad. Everything in life's about him. That's just kind of how it is. So then I'm overseas. I come back. We moved back to San Diego in end of 2000, beginning of 2001. And it's like, okay, Jeff, do you want to start pursuing this again with your birth mom? And I had lost all the papers. I didn't have any of the information. So I'm like, you know what?
You didn't have that phone number?
No, I didn't have any of that anymore. Because
I,
we didn't have computers back then. There wasn't laptops. There wasn't cell
yeah.
phones back.
It was
So,
just on some piece of
right. And
paper.
we moved overseas and moved back. So it's like, for me, I always was like, okay, this isn't the right time. I believe the universe is positive, that everything's going to work out. It's not the right time. So we just kind of let things go. Um, and then my mom ended up passing away in 2012 on tax day. They say the only thing that's, is death and taxes. So that all happened for her on the same day. And yet we did her memorial on Mother's Day.
I,
Now I'm doing the memorial for my adoptive mom on Mother's Day, where I already have these issues that I didn't know about with Mother's Day. And then anyway, so that was interesting. And so then I did 23andMe. Some friends got me 23andMe for my birthday one time, and I did that. No hits, nothing. I'm like, okay, whatever.
but you kind of know, you do know there's the Yakima, Washington
I do know there's a
connection.
little bit of connection there. So then my oldest son, Kyle, did Ancestry. And this was in like May of 2022. And then he calls me, he says, Dad, I think I found your birth mom. I think I connected with your birth mom. I'm like, what the heck? He goes, yeah, I did Ancestry, and it shows that she's a match for my grandmother.
Uh-huh.
And
Wow.
he goes, you should do Ancestry. So then I did Ancestry, and then sure enough, it had her name, and it said, this is a match for your birth mom. So I'm like, okay, the only way to connect would be through emailing through Ancestry, through that
Let
little.
me let me let me quickly ask you though, did you not remember her name even though
Yeah,
you
that's what I was
lost
Yeah, I
the
wondering.
phone
remembered her
number?
name. I
Okay,
remembered her
okay.
name, but it's so there's two things. It's like, do I even want to open up all this can of worms with so much other stuff going on? And it's like, we just didn't talk about it. And
The
it took,
great delay, that's me.
right. And to me, it was like, if you have the narrative your whole life that it really doesn't matter that, you're loved, and whether you're born in the family or whether you're adopted, it won't affect you at all that much. You don't give it that much credit, right? And then, of course, most of my friends are non-adoptees, so they're like, "Oh, you're loved. Don't worry about it." And so, anyway, so I did it, and then I saw the connection. So I'm going to a business trip out in Kansas. I've been out of the ministry since we moved back to San Diego. I have another company that's kind of helping underserved people. We started a foundation. So I go out to Kansas City, and
Hmm.
at Kansas City, I sent the
Interesting.
email.
Next time you're here.
Yeah, and so I send an email on Ancestry. It's like, okay, am I ready for this? Because it's like, is she still alive?
Yeah, because every year delays, you know?
Does
Right.
anyone know about me? Does the family know about me? Am I opening
She
up?
wouldn't be on Ancestry if she, like,
If
in
Right.
she
my
wasn't hoping
opinion,
for
that's what I
something, I
think.
would
Exactly. And
Mhm.
think.
so that's what we
I think
assumed.
so.
We assumed that there was. So I send the email just kind of because honestly, my whole heart was I don't want her to worry about and wonder about me. I want her to know that I'm okay, that my life was great. If she's always wondering if she did the right thing, I'm alive, I have a great family, everything's well. I just want to ease that pain, whatever, if there was. I don't know if there was or not. You just don't know. You don't know what's happening. So it's like,
I feel like after all the stories
Right.
and things we've heard, I feel like there's always pain.
yeah, exactly. And so I send the email, get on a plane, fly back to San Diego, get off airplane mode. Boom, there's an email back from her. And so I'm like, do I open it?
Oh my
Of
God.
course. I hope you did.
Jeff.
No,
Jeff,
exactly.
come on. So
But
you did
you
open
know
it.
how it is
Tell
because
us.
this is one of those doors you open, there's no going back.
I'm
And
like you, so I get it. But I'm like, of course you opened it.
so you open it and it's like there was a positive response. It was like, wow, I never thought I had given you up to the angels to be taken care of. This is coming pretty pretty quickly for me and it's pretty intense time, but I'd love to communicate. So then of course I email back and so we have a few emails back and forth.
How old was she at this time, may I ask?
So I think she was born in 41. So I think she was 23 or something when she gave me
Mm.
something like that.
So she's not too old. She's,
No,
yeah,
and so we've been in communication since 2022 and she said she said and I said look I want to be in communication. I know this is tough or it's a shock. As much as you want to communicate, I'm open to communicating. But I also want to respect because I know I've had a life with ups and downs. She's had a life with ups and downs. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to say was in 2019, I had a hemorrhagic bleed. I had a stroke.
right.
And so I
So
had to,
now it's kind of important to get your
Yeah.
medical information.
well, exactly. But for me, it was more of the doctors are like, we don't know what caused the hemorrhagic bleed and we don't know what stopped the hemorrhagic bleed, but this bleed has a 20% survival rate.
Mm.
Mm,
It was a pretty serious one. And so I then was reading the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
right.
Hmm.
So it's like, okay, what am I holding inside that would cause a bleed? So then that's when I started going, okay, I've gone to my physical therapy, I've gone to my occupational therapy and speech therapy to get through the stroke. Let me now go figure out through
The
my
mind. Mhm.
mind how much, what happened here because what's permanent. Because then the other thing is when I was supposed to recover from my stroke, it's kind of like if you break your leg and then right after you take it off the cast, you got to go do physical therapy so there's no
Yeah.
scar tissue buildup. So right after I started being able to walk again, COVID hit. And so now it's like, okay, Jeff, we need you to get out and start getting in your regular schedule again, dealing with people, because that's got to exercise your brain and get that scar tissue worked through. But now it's like lockdown, so you can't do that. So now I went 2 years or a year and a half without any kind of social engagement. And then different things started happening. I had a couple grand mal seizures. I had
Wow.
a lot of like
Gosh.
social anxiety that I never had before. So then it's like, okay, what is permanent and what is not permanent? So then I
And what do
started,
you need to get to the bottom of, really?
right. And so then I started doing different therapy. And so then they're like, okay, let's try this type of therapy. And it's like a neurofeedback. And they're saying, okay, Jeff, how what causes most people to calm down causes you to stress out. And what causes most people to stress out calms you down. We don't know why, but this therapy is not really healing you on this type. So
What's
next,
an example of that? What do you mean? Like what causes
so it's
people
kind
to?
of like they have these frequencies where they try to help you find to kind of heal. That's what neurofeedback does.
Mhm.
But the thing that I've learned about myself is like going back to the safe places. Like I was in Beirut, Lebanon, watching the World Cup in '98, and I'm in Hezbollah territory in a bar with a bunch of Hezbollah guys watching the World Cup, US play Iran. And I'm totally fine with that, you know. And I've
It's a
been
safe place for you.
right. So to me,
Yeah.
it's like people are like, weren't you scared? I'm like, no, because I know I didn't belong there, but I don't feel safe anywhere else. So then even now in Tijuana, I go down to Tijuana and it's the most dangerous city for the last how many years, and we're in the most
Yeah.
dangerous part. And I'm down there dealing with cartel guys, and yet I feel secure there. And what I'm learning is that when I'm in places where both people are unsafe, that makes me feel a bond because now we're in this together with my friends. But when I come back to the States, now they're in their families and they're secure and they're safe. But for me, that's still not a safe place because I don't have that connection. I haven't found those safe places, you know?
It's interesting. Yeah.
It's
No, it is.
interesting.
It's weird. And so I'm trying to
Yeah.
perceive all this. So we're going through all these things, trying to learn all this. And then I started right after COVID, I started getting back to starting doing some work, and that got me out to Kansas City after the COVID and still not knowing how much I could do um, with my brain physiology. And that's when I had contacted my birth mom. So I'm going through a lot myself. And then she communicated, she said, look, I'm going through a lot in life. I would just kind of like a break for a little bit and I'll reach out and I'm like, great, I totally understand. So then on my birthday in 2021, she reached out to me. So I'm going, okay, she's reaching out on my birthday. So she does, this is good. I can go with that. And so we've been in communication. So
And it's still email
Has
between you.
yeah, it's
And
still,
has she given you, do you know your story, your birth story and all that? Has she
no,
told you?
no, because like, for example, she emailed me on Thursday of this week, because of course my birthday was Friday. And, you know, she goes, yeah, just, I'm going through, I've been going through 3 years of grief and pain, a loss, grief and loss, and I'm just starting to come out of it. And I'm going, okay, if she's going through 3 years,
Did she tell you why she
Yeah.
was going through grief?
no,
And you're not
and
asking,
that's her
are you
story.
not
No,
asking
because it's like,
questions?
no, it's her story. And I'm kind of like going, at least we're communicating. So I told her, I said, look, I'm going to be doing this podcast with the making of me, and this is who they are, and this is what they do. Would you want me to send you the link? Because I want to give you a glimpse into my life, just so that you
Oh,
know who I am. And she said, yes, please send me the link.
hi,
And
we're giving you a shout out. We
Please
don't know
tell
your
Jeff
name.
his story
well, and so, but I think it's like,
because we
so,
want to know.
but
Yeah.
I don't think I would. So if I had contacted her in '97, I wouldn't have been ready
Prepared.
and prepared because I had to go through all these other stuff to even open myself up. And everything is working out for the good because then when I'm trying to figure out all this therapy stuff and what's going on, they go back to your growing up and it's like, okay, is it the way you were raised? Is it scoliosis? Is it these different things? It's like, okay, they're all of a color of paint.
Yeah.
All have its role, but there was nothing that resonated. And then a friend of mine posted on Facebook that she watched Greg Gentry's interview with you guys and it read.
Oh,
And so I go, okay,
Greg Gentry, that's how you came
I'm
with
gonna
us.
I'm gonna watch it. So I watched it and he started sharing about how he felt in life. I'm
Yeah.
like, this resonates on a heart level more than anything else. And this explains a lot of other stuff. So let me start looking at this. So then I started watching and listening to all these other interviewees, and it's like, dude, I'm
Dude,
not an alien. I'm not like, so there,
Right.
you're
not
not
just,
an alien, dude. You're with us.
I'm
it's not
so
just
glad.
Alamos. It's not scoliosis. It's not Los Alamos. It's not being raised by doctors. It's not, okay, those all have its piece, and it's more the constellation or the kaleidoscope. But, and I try to get away from saying this narrative explains everything. That's why for me, it's more able to say, hey, this primal wound that I just started learning about 3 months ago, and I've read now 8 books, some
Wow,
some
you're snowballing into this.
well,
Aren't
yeah,
you?
because I'm like, I want to understand the biology behind this, because everybody has their opinions, but they
Yeah.
don't understand the biology, and it's amazing. And so for me, the concept of this is the canvas that the rest of your life is painted on makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
And this one thing paintbrushes everything. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Yeah. Jeff, this is really
Yeah,
great. I love the canvas piece
I
of
do
it,
too.
and you are so early in your journey, and I love this. And for your first mother who's listening,
Yes.
we look forward to hearing more of this, how this
A shout
evolves.
out to you. Yeah.
And if anyone's listening, and they want to meet Jeff on our monthly Zooms,
You're going to be the draw.
please join us. Yes, because we've got a lot of nuggets from you,
Well,
Jeff.
if people want to contact you, I feel free to give my email, because I can't
Okay.
really work. I still do the stuff in Tijuana, that's where my heart is. But after my stroke, I can't really work that much. So I have a lot of free time to
Good for
explore.
you.
So,
Yeah, we
Jeff, you're a
will.
neat person. And I would like to say, on the narrative part, we're doing this oral history of adoptees. You never know who's going to be the person that helps you, right? Like Greg Gentry, like
right.
whenever we've had guests who say, well, my interview is probably not important. You have these people. Yes, they're all important
Mhm.
Yeah.
because someone's
They're all
story
important.
resonates with another person and someone's story doesn't. But there is someone, when you hear them, you think, oh, that's really interesting, right?
Well, and I trust that one of the main things that I want to give you guys credit for is it's very hard for me to trust people, because it's always there's an agenda. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
right.
Always
Yeah.
seems to be an agenda. And you guys just interview people to tell their stories, and there's no agenda of I want you guys to make this point or that. And it gives us the freedom to be able to have our own voice with no judgment. And that's never been, even to this day, people judge. Like I was sharing in February with my son Kyle, when I just started learning about the primal wound, I started sharing him. We were in Santa Fe at a cafe, and I started sharing him just kind of the pain that I've gone through. And there were tears on both sides. And he's like, do you think this is really real? Well, we end up leaving the restaurant, going over to this other store, and one of the guys who owns the store or works at the store, I started talking to him, because I can talk to a tree. I try to talk to everybody and connect. Don't go very deep with but it's like I'm
You can
trying to
chit
find
chat.
the connections, right? And so he said, we started asking where he's from, and he said this and whatever. And I go, oh yeah, a friend of mine is adopted, and they're from there or whatever. Adoption came up, and he goes, well, yeah, we have one of my nieces is adopted, and she's been given everything, and now she wants to find her birth mom, so she's
Oh,
become
what a
a
horrible
monster.
person.
And so he said monster, so now she's been a grateful monster.
Oh
Ungrateful
God.
monster.
And so
Ah,
Kyle and Mary, my wife, were like, okay, this is real. It was just that validated everything we had just talked about 5 minutes later. And it was just natural. It wasn't even a setup or nothing. It's like, dude, yeah, this is how the story is if you choose to go ask these questions, you're ungrateful, and you're going to become a
She's been given everything. Now she's just this
she's an
horrible.
ungrateful monster.
Gosh, what a narrative is that?
anyway. So
You know what? That's a good book title, The Ungrateful
I
Monster.
know. I like it.
I might have to change my book title and use
Yeah,
that.
I like that. Little monster.
Jeff, thank you so much for coming
Thank
on.
you.
And
oh, it's my privilege. Thank you for letting me share my story. This is the first time I've ever told anybody any of this, so
we
Thank
have
I
a
you.
was
lot
having
of people come on,
Yes.
and it's the first time that they've told their story. We must be a safe space for people to emerge and
yeah,
tell their
you
story.
are.
So I'm
You guys are.
glad.
Yep. Well,
And thank
thank
you
you.
for being a Patreon and joining us because it's been fun since you've joined and
Oh,
it's
I
it's
know
fun
you've
anyway,
definitely
but you are a
you've
bright light.
you've brought
whatever I
great
can do to
energy
help you
to the
guys.
Patreon. Yeah, to the Zoom. So we'll see you, what is it,
June
2
1st.
weeks?
Yeah.
Gosh, that's quick, June 1st. Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome. See you then, Jeff. Thank
Okay,
you so
thank you guys
much.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.